instructional video is about SiteAudit Analyzer version 2, and specifically we're going to look at the Consumables report. So for SiteAudit Analyzer, there are some prerequisites you need. Version 6.8 of SiteAudit is recommended or later, and this is for both the on-site and the hosted platforms. If you want to use the new green report, the sustainability report, you will have version 7 as a requirement. Second, you'll need a license, and you can get the one-click or the designer license. The designer is really made for more advanced usage where you want to design your own reports and you've got experience with pivot tables. For 95% of most people, the one-click license is fine. And there's two other things you're going to need. You're going to need to be able to download from the Netaphor website something called Office Tools, which is a runtime version of Visual Studio. That's free, and you can just download it from our website. And of course, you're going to need to have Excel, and we support most all the versions of Excel from 2010, 13, 16, and Office 365. So this particular video is looking at consumables, and when you install SiteAudit Analyzer, it installs 6 called templates or workbooks, and everything from inventory to volume, and then consumables, fleet health, all the way down. And then there's some optional reports that you can get that look at auditing and TCO, or total cost of ownership, quarterly business review, and there's a security assessment, and then the new green analysis as well. Those are extra add-ons. The original 6, those get installed, and what we're going to focus on in this video is specifically the consumables workbook. So let's take a look at that. Where you find the 6, when you install Analyzer, it will install it in the SiteAudit folder, and you'll see a folder called Content Analyzer. If you click on that, then you'll see all the folders in version 2. What you'll find also is that there's a PPT or PowerPoint file that comes with it. And that's important because the Analyzer template or workbook is linked to that PowerPoint. So when you do work in the template and then you launch the PowerPoint, it links those charts. And so you can really go from working in the template right to presentation. Now both files need to be in the folder that they're together. And so if you do that and you launch the PowerPoint, then everything should be fine. What we're going to look at today, specifically, as I mentioned, we're going to look at the consumables report. So I've gone ahead and launched the consumable report, and the steps I would do next after launching the consumables template is I would need to get, obviously, data into that template. So if you look up on the ribbon here, you'll find the SiteAudit menu item, and there's 2 different ways you can get the data. If you're using hosted, then you'll connect to a hosted database. If you're using on-site, then you'll connect to a local instance of the database. Once you've done that, then what you need to do is you hit refresh, and that'll bring in the data from the database and populate the template as it should. If you close the workbook or template without saving it, then you'll have to open it again and then refresh and bring that data back in. So now let's take a look at the template and how it works. Let's look at some navigation of this template. So there's a summary which you can go and you can select those and then go to the different charts by just clicking the link here. That's one way. Another way is simply just to select the different tabs, and that'll take you right there as well. Third way, which I typically use, is I'll just right click on the bottom over here and where this arrow is, and that'll bring up the full list here. Then I can go to anyone I want to from there. So let's go ahead and we'll start with the dashboard, and then we'll move our way across here. So the dashboard is new in version 2. And what you can see, it's basically a summary of all the consumables charts. It looks at, for example, up here is the count of the number of consumables which are replaced each month. So that's a nice trend for you. There's a second one over here that looks at the average replacement level. That's the level that the supply was replaced at, and it takes an aggregate for that, an average for that month, and it provides that average, monthly average here as a trend. Over here, what we can see, these are the different levels at a given time. So from 0 to 25 is the amount of supply that's left currently in the supplies you're looking at. If you're looking at in-service, and that's the blue here, the red represents the supply level that was in those devices that have been retired. So in-service means that devices or printers that are currently being used, and retired means those that have been taken out of service. And down here at the bottom, you can see this is the different levels and the number of supplies for each of those 4 different levels. So there's 0 to 25 all the way through 76 to 100. So those that are in this bar right here would represent the consumables that really haven't been used, or not very much has been used. Then in this chart over here, we have what we call the waste cost, and it's a chart that measures how much waste there is in terms of a cost. And we'll take a closer look at that in a minute, but basically what it allows you to do is that you can look at the average amount that is wasted each month, and then you can offer a better scenario that is lower than that average, and you can take a look at what the cost savings would be. Now let's take a look at each of these reports specifically. So I'll go ahead and look at the levels first. And what we see here in the count of consumables by level is that for this particular customer, the one that we've looked at, there are 255. We'll have to take a look at this a little closer here. 255 supplies that are between 0 and 25%. In 26 to 50 and 51 to 75, there's 289 supplies, and then there are 567 that are greater than 75% left. So where does this information come from? So let's take a look at that. So this is a viewer here, and this is pointing to the database that was used for this consumables report. And what I've looking at here is this is the level here. This is the level left in the supplies. We can see that these supplies are in use, and the devices are in service. And this is whether the device is color or black and white. Okay. But we see at the bottom here, if we take a count, so if I was to right click here and go to count, give me 247. If I compare that with what I see over in the chart, it says 255. So we want to make sure that we use the right information here, and we can check that. But if I look at the retired column here, and what I see is that this is data being taken only from devices that are in service, not devices that have been taken out of service. And so for those in-service devices, there are 247. Now let's go over and look at our chart here. We may have to make some adjustments. If we look at the retired status here, what it's selected is all. So what I need to do is I need to adjust that and just say in service, get rid of the retired. If I do that, now I've matched the proper number of consumables with what the database should be showing for the number of in-service devices. So that's just one thing to check before you complete your analysis, to make sure that you're using what you want to be using, and you can do that in this filtering area up here. Now let's take another look at another report. This report looks at the count of consumables by month. And so each consumable that's been replaced is one, and then another, and so forth. And so if I looked at the month of December, there's 105 items which have been um, replaced that month. So what I want to do now is I want to do a little bit more filtering here, just to show you how you might filter that data. So I might use, say, for example, the department here, and I might want to be just looking at one department, and then that would change the number of consumables that are replaced per month there. So this is kind of nice. This filtering option allows me to kind of drill down, look at specific things that are required for whatever analysis I'm doing. So in this case, I've changed the filter to include just Hewlett Packard, and you can see what the changes look like once I've made those selections. Now down here, what I can see is I've got, this is all the data that's been um, pulled in, and I pulled in everything that's been collected for the period of time that we've been monitoring. And what I might want to do instead is just look maybe on an annual basis. So what I can do is I can use the date filter here, and I might want to look at say last year. So if I select last year for this one department, then I've got all of 2019. And let's go ahead and change this filter up here to look at all departments. Okay, so now I'm looking at all departments for the year of 2019, and I can see a nice trend here. For whatever reason, people placed a lot of toner and other supplies in August, and in also April as well. So that's a little bit how you use the filtering and the date range. Now let's look at the next chart here. Looks at the average replacement level. We spoke about this earlier, and that is the level that the supply was at when it was replaced. And again, what I want to do here is I want to look at just a year's time. So I'm going to go to the date filter again and just select last year. And what it shows me is that across 12 months, that the average is 5.5%. So across all those 12 months, on average, there's 5%, a little over 5% that's left in a supply. And again, I could go ahead and do some more filtering if I wanted to. If I wanted to look at, for example, just on some specific types of consumables. This, by default, it's set for ink, toner, toner cartridge. If you wanted to also add in things like the fuser and developer, then those are things you could add in as well. So we go down to the next chart here, and this one is a little hard to read. It's only because I'm viewing it smaller, but basically what this chart does, let's go ahead and change the view here. We'll zoom in a little bit. We'll go up to, let's say, 75%. And now we can see this is not a chart, but what it does is it allows us to see what supplies are coming up for replacement. So I could go over to this column here called estimated days remaining. And I go over here, what I could do is I could select the number of days remaining, which is important for either ordering supplies or seeing what I need to have on hand in order to keep everything with supply. So let's just go and let's pick what needs to be replaced in the next 3 days here. And what it does is it shows me the description of what needs to be replaced, many times the part number, the address of the device, and the type of supply that it is. So this is really useful when you're planning to know what supplies are required. Now let's go to our last chart here, and this is a really interesting chart because it allows us to estimate what the cost might be if we don't have a good supply program that reduces that replacement supply level. So what we're looking at here is, again, we're looking at the whole view here in terms of all the months. And I'm first going to make a change here. I'm going to look at just last year. So let's look at just last year, see how that changed things. So I got January through December here. And let's just make sure that we've got all those months checked. If I put my mouse there, I can go and this will open up the list here, make sure that all the months are included. Sometimes there might be some months that aren't checked for whatever reason, and you can just make sure that they are checked by going up to this, by putting your mouse here and then going up to this selection here and selecting that. Okay, so if we look at all that and we look at the supply level, on average for these months here, it looks like it's around 7%. And so what I want to do is I get to play with the cost up here. And what this is showing is that the waste cost is a little over 8,278. I have the potential of saving 2,363, but that's at the 7%. So if I was to reduce that to say 2%, and if I wanted to say my black and white costs are say 200, and let's leave it like it was so we can compare that. Say at 150, but you can change this if you want to. Let's just change that so we have something to work on. So if I go up to data, hit refresh all, that will update the cost. So here at 2%, what I can see is that if I was to manage the supplies better, so if the average goes from 7% to 2%, and these are the costs up here, then I have a potential savings of 1716. So the closer I get to zero, let's hit zero here, and then let's go ahead and refresh again. That should go to zero, and it does. So if I have a perfect world where supply levels are replaced exactly when they're empty, then I'll save the maximum amount of cost there. And so that allows you to provide some different scenarios, which would have, either you as the partner maybe saving money, or if the end user is paying for this, then that would be the money they would be saving. Okay, so those are all the charts that come with the Consumables Workbook, our template. Now let's see what happens when we go to the PowerPoint, which is as the charts that are linked there. So we're going to go and open that up. And what it's going to ask us to do is to update those links. And here we can see that this is the title slide, and you can modify this however you want to, give it a different name. Obviously, if you're presenting it to somebody, you want to put the proper name there. Here we can see these are the totals that we looked at here. Let's go back to the consumable levels. If we go look at, this is the counts replaced, and this is for the period of time which we changed it to, all of 2019. Now let's take a look at here. Let's see if we make a change. We'll go back here. If we make a change in our template, what would happen to the PowerPoint? So let's go ahead and do that. We'll say, instead of looking at multifunction, single function, we'll just look at multifunction. So if we look at multifunction, we can see that that's gone from 247 to 186. Let's check our presentation. We can see that indeed has been changed as well. So if we do some changes in the template, it will be reflected over in the presentation as well. And we can look at the other slides here. We looked at the counts per month. We can look at the waste cost, etc. So that's how that works. Now there's one last thing I wanted to show everyone, and that is if I was to, so we want to look at the localization here. So let's suppose that I was working on a different language, and I was to launch this, and I want to see what gets localized to whatever the regional settings are in my on my system here. And what we can see is that my regional settings are set for German. So now it's doing some localization automatically. And what we'll see is that the charts are also localized into the language which are set for the regional settings on your machine. So here we're looking at German, and we can see all the filters and changed to that language. And so that makes it quite easy, whether you're working in English-speaking country or you're working in a country that speaks Spanish, German, French, etc. So that's the consumables template for Analyzer version 2.